Hi, this is Rob Plenek of C3Method. In today's video, I'm going to take you through my posterior chain leg day. We're going to focus on glutes, hamstrings, and calves. I do this the day before I do my quad focused workout. So I do like having my legs split up. I feel as though I can give a better effort to each grouping when I split them up. And the way in which I structure this workout doesn't really damage or stress my CNS. It doesn't really wear me out. I actually consider this kind of like an active rest day because I use so many isolations, which you're going to see in the video. That way I can split my leg days up but not feel fatigued on that second day. So pretty fun stuff. Hopefully you enjoy the video. The first exercise I start with is usually lying leg curls. Sometimes I'll switch this up with our seated leg curl machine, but I like lying leg curls to get everything warmed up, and I feel as though it can get blood flow and fluid flow through the tissues, and then when I go into the seated leg curl, I can be in a stretched position and under heavier weight load and have less injury risk or risk of like pulling the hamstring. I do find that the seated leg curl is more of a stretch, so I like feeling more warmed up when I get to that movement as opposed to this one. When I do this, I'll sometimes do high reps, which for me would be maybe 14 to 20 reps. Sometimes I'll do heavy, which is usually 8 to 14. Sometimes I'll do it both legs. Sometimes I'll do it single. Sometimes I'll do overload eccentrics. I just really like to play with the variety depending on how I'm feeling that day. I'll show you the main technique cues while I'm doing the movement, but essentially what I'm really focusing on is remaining under control. I don't want to feel my hips rotating and moving. I don't want to feel my lower back contracting to help the movement. The goal is to isolate the hamstrings and cause maximal stress load into the hamstrings, not to move the most amount of weight. So that is my focus, is can I get the most misery for the hamstrings, but keep everything else out of the movement. Paired with the first hamstring movement, I perform calf raises. My typical, most common way of performing them is here on our hack squat. I just face the other direction and it turns into a machine calf raise. I do put on usually a decent amount of weight for me, what I would consider a decent amount of weight. With this, I've trained my calves every way under the sun over all the years. I've been lifting weights for over 25 years now. And I've done 100 days in a row challenges before, training them once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week, high reps, low reps, everything in between. What I find is that if I'm consistent over time, that's gotten the best result. And consistent with it just being some kind of miserable stimulus as soon as they feel like they're recovered. Currently, my strategy is to train them on this day and I train them tomorrow. So I train them on back-to-back days, and then I have 2 days of rest, sometimes a third day, but usually it's 2 days of rest. Then I come back to another 2 days. So it's 2 on, 2 off, 2 on, 2 off. And for me, that tends to work well. I would like them to be a lot bigger, that's for sure. But I'm currently dieting to try to get leaner. That's going to impact some of the rate of growth. When I've been heavier at 300 pounds, my calves were definitely bigger because I was moving around 300 pounds. When I've been lighter, I've been down to, in the recent last 10 years or so, the lightest I've gotten was 220. And they did have more definition and proportionally they looked good, but they were circumference-wise smaller. You're gonna definitely have that happen from 220 versus 300 pounds. With this, my goal is I'll do straight sets, usually somewhere up around 14 to 20 reps. Every once in a while, and I think I'll show you in today's video, I do what I call overload eccentrics. So I use the frame of this machine to help me once I reach good form failure with no assistance. I actually pull on the frame to help me with the contraction, and then I let go of the frame and control the eccentric. So that is an overloaded eccentric, meaning I'm assisting for the contraction, which now means I'm really over fatigued. I'm past what would be a normal fatigue point, and I'm letting that overload by taking away that assistance. The other thing you'll see here is I have a Rogue squat wedge. This is a 10-degree wedge, metal wedge, pretty awesome. I like this thing. I use it as my calf raise block, which would be kind of like what's allowing me to get a bigger range of motion than just a normal flat platform. I really like the slant on this. I find it's better on my feet, the balls of my feet, than a typical calf block, which has like the edges, like the hard edges, squared off edges. I find that that can make my feet feel sore, especially if I'm training my calves often. So I like this, really good setup, very happy with it. So I'll get a set in so you can see from this angle what my tempo and range of motion looks like, and then I'll also show you that overload technique. Now that we have the hamstrings warmed up with the lying leg curls, I do go into my seated leg curls. Now that the hamstring is more pliable, I can usually do this heavier and not run into any kind of risk or pulling of the hamstring muscle. Since this does have a greater stretch position, I do like having that warm up first. With this, a tip that I like to do is to pause in the contraction on my warm-up sets, if not also my working sets, so that way I can make sure I'm really isolating the hamstring and not letting other muscles get involved. It helps you build that mind-muscle connection with the hamstrings. And then I also pair this usually, or I'll go into after these, form of an RDL or a stiff leg deadlift. If I really take my time on this and I focus on mind-muscle connection, no momentum, really controlling the tempo, I find that I get a better stimulus out of my RDLs, stiff leg deadlifts, any kind of hinge movement. I can get better mind-muscle connection, better hamstring stimulus from those without as much of a heavy weight load, which helps me not to overload my core muscles. That way I can keep a better taper on the midsection and develop more of like the X frame that we want. If I do RDLs, stiff leg deadlifts, any kind of hinge movements, totally fresh, you often have to load those really heavy. And for me, since I have a little bit of a longer torso, that tends to cause my obliques and my abdominal wall to thicken. Back when I used to do powerlifting, I had worked up to a 700-pound deadlift and over 600-pound squat, and my core had gotten pretty thick to brace and hold those type of weights. Now that I've moved into bodybuilding, I've backed off on those heavier weight loads. My core has actually tapered in quite a bit, which I'm really happy with. So I really like making sure that when I'm doing my isolation movements, my hamstring stuff, that I take my time, really beat the crap out of the hamstrings. So then when I go into the compound movements, they don't need to be as heavy. The last part of today's workout is some type of hinge movement. Today I'm going to be doing some dumbbell RDLs. I'll swap this out sometimes with our Smith machine, doing some RDLs or stiff leg deadlifts. We also have a Nautilus glute drive, which is a machine hip thrust, so I'll use that as well. When I'm using that, I like to do low reps, heavy weight, and paused contractions. When I'm doing the Smith machine or dumbbells, I'm more in favor of like 10 to 14 reps, a continual tension, working on stretching and squeezing the muscle, but usually not trying to unload at any point the tension. I want to have a nice continual tension. I'll either pair these like I'm doing today with the seated hamstring curls and just go back and forth, or I'll do this separate at the end. When I do dumbbells, I like to pair it with the machine, so I don't have to go as heavy. The two kind of like fatigue each other out. If I'm doing a Smith machine, I might do that separate at the end, apart from doing the seated hamstring curls. With dumbbell RDLs, one of my favorite aspects of doing them is that you can position the dumbbells around your thighs. So you'll see while I'm doing the movement that if you're doing with a regular barbell, it has to be out in front of you the entire time. So even though you're pinching your lats and you're trying to keep the bar close, it is out in front. Whereas with dumbbells, you can kind of angle them along the side, not the direct side, but like a 3/4, kind of like the angled this way. You can put them on that angle, and that helps you get more glute and hamstring rather than lower back. So just a little difference of having your hands sliding along like the sweep rather than out in front, to me makes a nice difference. This, I feel I can get a better glute focus, whereas on a Smith machine or a barbell, I get more hamstrings. So it kind of depends on what I want that day. With these, I'll just show you a working set. It's just slow, controlled motion, focusing on a stretch. I don't get crazy with the weight load or try to set any PRs or anything. I'm just trying to build muscle. So the goal is to soak in the muscle stress and not worry about what weight I'm using. Okay, so that's the technique that I use. That's the tempo I like to use. Just nice continual tension throughout the movement. So that wraps up the posterior chain day. We focus on glutes, hamstrings, and calves. As I showed, I usually start with hamstring isolation and calf raises. I then go into another hamstring isolation and finish with some type of hinge movement. Every once in a while, I'll split out the hinge movement into something that's unilateral, maybe a split squat or a staggered stance RDL. Those are usually the times where I'm not going to have that second leg day the very next day. Maybe there's something going on with my schedule, maybe I'm meeting a client or doing something as a work project. If I know the next day I'm going to have off or have a gap before my quad dominant leg day, I'll usually put some type of quad work or more overall compound movement into this workout. However, this is the normal structure I use. So my current rotation is a push day, which is chest, shoulders, specifically the mid delts and triceps. I then have a pull day, which is rear delts, back and biceps. Then I have this day, the posterior chain, glutes, hamstrings, and calves. And then I have my quad day where I do quads, but also calves again. And there's going to be some overlap with this workout today because I'm going to be doing a compound movement. I usually like to have some type of bilateral squat and then some type of unilateral movement, such as walking lunges, step-ups, and whatnot. It's a current routine that's working really well for me. I'm really enjoying this. I'm currently around 250 to 255 pounds at about 11% body fat the last time I did a DEXA scan. Eating between 3,000 to 3,500 calories, usually a minimum of 300 grams of protein a day, but it's often up around 350. It's working well. I'm not gonna, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I'm just gonna keep going with it until it's broke. And then I'll work on fixing it. If you have any questions, if you have any requests for future videos, let me know. I appreciate your time and thank you for watching.